Welcome into the Sunday side session. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone, the Connor Happer Show. This is one of those rare occasions where he has a co-host after running off many throughout the years. Happer, welcome into a discussion about Nebraska's 28-10 win over Colorado.
Schaefer, I don't know how long ago you asked me to do this, but it might have been sometime in July. You said, "Okay, can we mark you down for the Sunday after the Colorado?" I'm the guy that people go to, I guess, when they have widely varying emotions, either horrible pain and sadness or extreme euphoria, and it seems like we got the latter last night around here.
Well, I viewed you as someone that I very much wanted to discuss this game with, regardless of how the context went, because one, we used to do several radio shows, and two, it felt like this game really had the potential to go anywhere, and so I needed a guest that could go anywhere. Plus you were insulted by Colorado media throughout the week. They said that you look like someone who would eat your friend.
That's true. I would like to go back on that show. I've submitted a request to go back on that Denver radio show on Monday. I have not heard back yet, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to want you. I have no idea. You might just be banned from all future appearances. We'll see. So I there's a lot to get into. Let's start with this. I sent this text to Brunts at like 2 a.m, and I knew the answer because there really is no other answer. And so I'm not even going to ask it as a question. I'm just going to say it as a statement. Tony White's the best Nebraska coordinator since Charlie McBride. I guess that's really figuring out who the next best one is. And then Brunts and I were sitting there trying to rank what we've watched since, 1997. And I think I arrived on the next best is my old friend Tim Beck, who I've often, mocked repeatedly. So other than that, and that's not to, Mark Banker had a nice stretch in there. Eric Shenander's 2021 was pretty good, and at times 2020. But there hasn't been, a lot of difference making coordinators throughout the years at Nebraska. Tony White feels like one of those guys. Now that's in the framework of what Matt Rule is building, but I think you have to give him a lot of credit for the way that Nebraska has played football, really going back to post Colorado last year.
Yeah, I think you have to give him a ton of credit because, I mean, it wasn't a group that had a lot of expectations going into last year, and then all of a sudden, about 4 games in, it was like, oh, this group is good, and then by the end of the season, they were really good, and then everybody came back, and now they're really, really good. So I don't know. Nebraska will turn a lot over after this year on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think it's exclusively about players. Rule talks about it all the time. They're a defensive oriented program, and they're always going to be good at defense, and I believe that. But they have very good players. they have very good players. They have experienced players. And they know what they're doing, and they're really hungry. Rule had the line last night. Ty Robinson is a dominant football player, and man, he had his paw prints on this one the entire way through. They have experienced players at every level, and they could trust those guys. So when Nebraska's kind of putzing around on offense, not doing anything really in the second half, it's like, yeah, okay, we'll punt it back to them. What are they going to score 4 touchdowns on us? No, they held a really explosive offense to 10 points last night, and it was a really, really impressive performance. And this is a great defense, bar none. This is a great defense. No qualifiers. Nebraska has a great defense right now.
Here's why I don't even worry about the replacement of players. It's John Bullock. I mean, watching that guy on Saturday, I mean, I thought that he had a good year in 2023. He has a nice role piece, but there was a lot of question about what it was going to look like at inside linebacker after Nick Henrich and Luke Reimer and those guys. I mean, John Bullock was incredible last night. He was all over the field. He had multiple hurries of Shedeur Sanders. He tipped one of those passes on one of those hurries. He had the 4th down stop where it looked like he met the running back at the point where he's going to get the ball from Sanders. I mean, he was fantastic. And that was a guy that was like a found $20 bill in their pocket when they arrived in 2022. I mean, there was no expectations for what John Bullock was because he wasn't really playing. They moved him down from safety and they just elevated this guy and watched him flourish. I just think they have that ability because they play so many players and they're getting great performances out of people that I think have been written off. No one went into this year saying, I really want to see MJ Sherman more. It was about other guys, and yet MJ Sherman's been fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good.
I mean, and he was a former 5-star, so the talent obviously is there, but they're getting some of the best out of guys where I think you thought the book was written on who they are. And so I'm impressed by that. I mean, 2 years ago, no one was envisioning a scenario in which we were talking about Ty Robinson as this monster defensive lineman. Instead, it was more, man, I kind of wish that we saw more out of one of their top recruiting gets that they had in the 2019 class. And now it's big ass Ty Robinson is a wrecking ball. He's been so good through 2 games. We don't even talk about how good Nash Hutmaker is. That's how good Ty Robinson is.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's remarkable watching the way we shift how we talk about these defensive players that we felt kind of certain about even a year ago.
That's called development, Schaefer. They're doing it.
I'm not used to it, Happer.
Yeah.
I cover Nebraska football.
It's a real thing. And, their stars are their stars too. And Rule had the line last night, which I thought was great. Our team is our star. We have stars. Our team is our star. But they play a lot of guys, and they're getting that development. I mean, Willis McGahee had a flash play last night, right? So some young guys at the linebacker spot, some young guys kind of all over the field. It's not just their experience. I didn't want to say, hey, it was just about the personnel. But man, they do have some good players and they are dominant right now. Let me just say this, Schaefer, like I love that this is the story today. Yeah. I think it's the great, like it's the perfect result for Nebraska in the way that they sort of want to like point the program and want to make it look like, Colorado we were sitting at a tailgate before the game. It was a tailgate and people were hammered and we were doing our pregame show and Colorado fan comes up and he's like, I think that the Buffs are going to win 45-40 or something like that. And I go, there's no way that Colorado's getting 45 points. I would have been willing to stake my life on it. Colorado's not getting 45 points tonight. I knew that they weren't getting 30 and I knew that there was a pretty good chance that they wouldn't get 20. I was impressed by 10. I mean, they were suffocating. And the crowd obviously had a big part in that. And they got Shedeur Sanders to throw the big pick 6. But he doesn't throw interceptions ever. But this is a great storyline. I think if this is the national storyline and the national takeaway about what happened last night, it's great news for Nebraska because that defense is legit.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the crowd. They were on fire from the start of that game through the finish of that game. And it helps that you got the combination of Nebraska kicks that ball off. Colorado doesn't get it to the 25. The first play, I think, is a tip pass. The third play is the sack. Like you kept the crowd in it right away. They didn't get a chance to really get Nebraska off balance. And then Nebraska was just playing downhill against them all night. And that's a tough place to be when you don't have much resistance in front of your quarterback. And so I just don't think Colorado knew how to call a game against what they were facing. And that was kind of evident. I mean, even when they tried to run, it generally came in obvious situations. Nebraska destroyed both of their 4th downs. I mean, how often do you see 4th and shorts where the officials are like, nah, we don't even need to go get the chain gang for this one. You can stay on the sidelines. We're going the other way.
Because they so clearly went backwards.
Right. Right.
I mean,
their most successful running plays were late in the game when Nebraska was not anticipating anyone was going to run or a couple scrambles by the backup quarterback.
So, okay, just to go quickly through Colorado's first, 10 or so offensive plays. So, like you said, 1, 2, 3 for them. It was a tip ball at the line of scrimmage, a drop pass, a long screen pass in LeJontay Webster's face, and then a sack. Nebraska goes down. They score a touchdown, and then an 11-yard sack. Then they get some of it back to get to third down, and then they go for it on fourth down after getting 10 more and go backwards for 2 yards. Like, these are just things that have such a detrimental effect on your mental state. Like, a couple sacks, tip balls at the line of scrimmage, not getting it on fourth down, having to punt from deep in your own end zone, a shanked punt that was mixed in there on their next drive, and then ultimately, kind of the backbreaking pick six. So that was the whole thing for me going into it. I just thought Nebraska needed to suffocate them and not let them breathe, and they had the opportunity to do that. And that first quarter, if you just pull up the first quarter stats, I mean, it's over. It's over after the first quarter. Nebraska outgained them 103 to -2 in the first quarter.
And that doesn't even include the fact that ball was just off the fingertips of Jalen Lloyd. It could have been 21-0 in that quarter. Nebraska ends up missing the field goal to start the second quarter, which is an entirely different conversation we'll be having later in this podcast when the tone turns from mostly positive to a little disgruntlement. So we'll get to special teams in a little bit. I want to move over to offense, and it was not the sort of game that I think people expected it to be. Certainly after that first 15 minutes, Nebraska only scores 21 points on offense. I'm going to say something, and I just want to see how you react to it. Perhaps Colorado's defense is better than we give it credit for.
They hung right in there. I thought that Nebraska had kind of broken them in totality after what I just mentioned. First few drives, especially just the first quarter. Midway through at half, 28-0. I just thought they were going to roll over and die. Nebraska was going to run the ball for 150 yards in the second half and get out of there with a 35-7 win or something like that. No, they shut down. Now it's easier to defend Nebraska when they're getting conservative and they're trying to kind of run the clock out, which is definitely what they were doing in the second half. But yeah, I think that was a pretty okay defense. And not that Nebraska is proven that it could be this, great explosive offense. But I do think they have the potential to do that. And it certainly looked easy a week ago against UTEP. I just thought Nebraska was going to have their way when they got to that point in the game. They didn't. I credit them absolutely. I think they hit really hard on that side of the ball. So I don't think that's a bad team. I think it's an incomplete team. I think they have some bad parts that are really glaring and could sink them. And their offensive line is still not fixed. But I don't think that's a bad team. If they keep it together from an emotional standpoint, they might be okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would point back to their game against North Dakota State. They had a terrible first half defensively, and then they kind of locked in the rest of that game. Now, North Dakota State, FCS team, whatever, but that's 2 second halves in a row where clearly they've made good adjustments in game. They've managed to bow up defensively in the second half and in both of those cases. Now, Nebraska had some plays that came back, and whether they should have or not is an entirely different conversation that we don't even really need to get into.
Oh, we're not going to do ref corner on this.
We don't have to. There's really no. I mean, it was
bad on both sides.
Yeah, it was unevenly terrible in terms of what was getting called and how and why it was getting called. And they were largely letting them play in the secondary, but then not letting them play on the offensive line and or elsewhere. So it was bad. That's basically all I feel like we need to say on it. But for the most part, I actually walked away from this thinking it was a better win than I thought it was going to be going into it, because I don't know that Colorado is going to rip off a bunch of wins in the Big 12, but I don't think that's a team you want to play most weeks because that's a tough challenge if they're healthy. Now, Nebraska beat the crap out of Shedeur Sanders. To the point where I guess I wasn't that surprised that he didn't finish the game because you had no way of winning. And do you just want to get teed off upon for another 15 plays? I don't know what kind of message that sends to the rest of the locker room. That would be one thing. But if he's healthy and Travis Hunter is healthy and the rest of that group is largely healthy, I think they can challenge, teams in the Big 12. But I just felt like, for as bad as it looked at times for Nebraska's offense and as disjointed as everything was, I do want to give Colorado's defense credit for some good adjustments. And they were nailing their run fits. I mean, Nebraska's offensive line was a little overwhelmed. And so that leads me to this. What is your level of confidence? Big Ten play starts here in a couple of weeks. You get an Illinois team that just beat Kansas and hounded Jalen Daniels into 3 interceptions. And defensively, Illinois looks to be solid yet again. What's your confidence in this offensive line in terms of it's late in the game and Nebraska needs to be able to pick up some first downs to end things? I mean, that's one of the takeaways here is there's still a big road to go offensively for them to be where they want to be to finish games.
It's one of the ideas that we talked about in the summer, Schaefer. You and I know specifically had this conversation a couple times. I right now, and you saw a little bit of this last night, when they needed yards, it was going into the hands of number 15. And they, whether they get going in the screen game or, because they obviously feel confident in that. They ran what, 7 to 10 screens last night. Maybe got a little screen happy, I guess. At times.
A lot of that is just counteracting all the blitzing from Colorado.
Yeah, trying to move some guys around. No, it was definitely choppy in the run game last night. Came out to be 35 rushes for 149 yards, which is 4.3 yards per carry last night. Like Dowdell, 17 for 74, the 2 touchdowns. He ran so hard. And I think there is some of this where it's like Nebraska had such control and such an emotional edge in the first, 30 minutes of that game that it's hard to kind of regain that after coming out of the locker room up by 4 touchdowns. So I think there was probably a little bit of that if we're, making a small excuse for them. But I don't know if it's a concern. It's definitely an unanswered question right now. The question that has been answered is who's your running back, and that's Dowdell. That
Dowdell and Johnson for sure.
Yeah. Dowdell's your lead back. Johnson's your third down guy, and he had 9 for 33 last night, and he was pretty good, and he made some extra plays too. But yeah, I don't know that I'm totally confident in the ability for Nebraska to go out and road grade people, but I don't know that I thought that they had to be before the season. I thought about 150, 160 a game was going to get it done, and they ran for 149 last night, and I thought that was enough. It was a little uneven, and they weren't able to salt it away. But I do think we know who they're going to go to when you need to get short yardage situations, and that's your quarterback, and let him either make decisions in an RPO game or spread it out to a wide receiver or throw a screen out there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the takeaways I had is that Nebraska was mixing in some zone reads later in that game, which I continue. I said this, I think, on your not podcast, on your radio show. Apologies to
There's a difference, Schaefer. People forget.
There is. One's professional and the other is for hobbyist enthusiasts like myself. I love just sprinkling that in there because no one's going to take that overly serious. And there will be a time in the red zone where Dylan's just going to be able to keep it and walk into the end zone because everyone's going to be crashing so hard on Ramir or Dante Dowdell or Emmett or Gabe, whoever. But I like working that in there. I like that we saw him scramble a little bit. It was I think after the first week and the way that people had kind of built it in their head that Dylan Raiola was just never going to run. And he's got a good pocket presence for a freshman. I think, felt pressure, a few different times. There was maybe one where he just did not see the blitz and it blew everything up. But I appreciate that there's more mobility in his game than certainly we saw against UTEP. And so I think that's going to be helpful against some of these Big Ten defenses. Let me ask you another thing about the offense from last night. Any concern from you about the wide receivers as they weren't as big of a part of things as you would have suspected maybe coming into the game?
No, didn't get open last night. They had to really they were really heavy on, the Barney coming around the edge stuff, which worked for them, or Barney on a route across the flat there. So Vermeer had 8 catches last night. Barney had 6. Nair had 4, which it didn't even seem like that many. And Banks was basically a non-factor with 2. They took one shot to Nair, and that was defended very, very well. And I don't really remember too many throws to Banks in Banks's direction at all. And so Nebraska, a lot of what they were doing is kind of moving side to side a little bit last night. Lloyd had the catch where he made a great adjustment and came back for it. Burkircher had the one over the middle. And that was a nice play. Yeah, I definitely like if I was drunk on wide receivers last week, I'm like, oh, okay. I'm sobering up a little bit now. It's it's Nebraska's not going to have the best wide receiver crew in the country. And I don't know if anybody thought that last week. But we definitely were high on them coming off of the summer and what we heard, and they were pretty explosive a week ago. So I think those players are still good, and some of it is the game plan and the script, and Nebraska's up 4 touchdowns and the whole thing. But worry's not the right word. It's just that you looked at the individual plays, and they weren't able to get what they wanted when they were wanting it. So I guess that's kind of the takeaway for me.
Michael Brunt said this last night on our reaction podcast, where he basically just said, last night was sort of a coach's dream. You come out, you dominate early in the first half, and then the second half shows that you're nowhere where you want to be as a finished product.
No doubt.
And I feel like the offense is very much a work in progress. And part of that is just sort of determining what exactly you have in the passing game, how you can try to scheme things open. I think that honestly, having Northern Iowa in this third game works really well for Nebraska's schedule. I mean, they're going to have an opportunity to overwhelm a team, but they can also just kind of go work on some stuff. If you want to try to get vertical passing, what you take away from that game, I don't know, but you really do have a chance to kind of spend the week like, okay, we want to focus on this. We want to do this. We want to get better at that. And then go see how it looks against an opponent where, frankly, Nebraska's defense is going to eat Northern Iowa's lunch.
That's what I'm saying. Like, how many points do you think Nebraska's going to give up by the time they go to Columbus? I mean, they played the best.
I don't know about the Rutgers game. That's the only one but the rest of these offenses aren't good.
They played the best offense that they're going to see, and they gave up 10 points, and it maybe shouldn't have even been that many. 70 UTEP, who was, fast, and they were at least trying to move things up and down the field. Northern Iowa is not scoring any more than 2 touchdowns. Illinois is like, Nebraska is going to be averaging defensive points allowed like far less than 2 touchdowns before it like in the first 7 games of the year. So we talk about Nebraska's offense, and yeah, it's a work in progress, but just give me 17 and we can get out of here with wins. Like that's going to be the story, I think, of the first 8 weeks of the season here.
Is there any part of you that finds it somewhat funny that this is the most supercharged Big Ten West team Nebraska has maybe had in a long time, and the Big Ten West doesn't exist?
It's the perfect formula. It really is. It's a really, truly great defense with a functional quarterback and a functional offense, and that's the dream. Yeah, let's just say it, Schaefer. Nebraska would have won the Big Ten West this year, and unfortunately, they won't get an opportunity to.
Well, they can still set themselves up nicely in other ways.
I don't know about Wisconsin. Might not be any good. I
don't think there's a might in this. Yeah. They weren't good last year. Like I was dumbfounded by the pushback I received during the spring and the summer when I was like, yeah, Nebraska's going to beat Wisconsin. They have more talent. They're the better team. And people were just like stunned by this. They should have beat Wisconsin last year. They were up 14-0 in that game. There was no reason they should have lost to Wisconsin in 2023. They should have beat Wisconsin in 2022 when Jim Leonhard showed that he probably should never be anyone's head coach with his in-game decision-making. I mean, they could have beat Wisconsin in 2021, and they didn't play in 20. Like, the gap between Nebraska and Wisconsin is never as big on the field as people have made it in their minds. And now I would say Nebraska is decidedly a more talented team. Can they stay out of their own way? That's always kind of been the question with them. I feel the same about Iowa. I think there have been people that have been persuaded that Nebraska's issue in the Frost era was talent. And that was never true.
Oh, no.
You and I were well on that discussion in 2021. But I think it still permeates throughout this, where people are like, oh, they just, Matt Rule's got to get his guys. No, they've had talent. Like, Ty Robinson has been this guy his entire Nebraska career. He didn't have Terrence Knighton to get it out of him. He didn't have Corey Campbell to help specialize his body to make him a physical machine. Some of what has transpired has persuaded people that Nebraska was actually not a talented team and was bad and all of these other things. No, they were poorly coached. They were poorly coached and poorly developed, and had been for an 8-year stretch. And it led to a lot of horrible results.
This is how it's supposed to go. Like,
yes.
What you're seeing right now is just like, I feel like this comes out in Matt Rule sometimes too. Like, you ask him about this sort of idea of, oh, wow, this big jump or whatever, is like, yeah, this is just normal. We expected this to not only did we expect this to happen, but like, we knew it was going to this is exactly how we thought it was going to go. We knew that we had good players and they all wanted to come back and stick around. And guess what? They're acting like good players because we have got them to the point where fundamentally they can trust themselves to be good players on the football field. So yeah, I Wisconsin, Iowa, it's Nebraska beat Iowa in 2022, and they beat them because their talent shined brighter than Iowa's talent in that game. So it's just about going out there and kind of like, it's not easy to beat those teams, but Nebraska's always been capable for like the last 10 years. And, those are the two at the end of your schedule. I don't know, like USC, has had a really good start to their season. We know Ohio State's really good. UCLA is horrible. And those are your last 5. They've already changed. The picture's already changed from when we talked about it at the start of the season. Now the picture will change the first 6 as well. Like Indiana maybe looks a step better than we thought they were going to be this year. But yeah, if you're thinking ahead, because fans can do this, if you're thinking ahead and you're like, oh man, what are we in for this year? Do it. Indulge yourself. Absolutely. Eat the chocolate cake. Why not? Like, it's Nebraska's got a good team and they could beat basically anybody on their schedule.
Are you encouraging fans to have fun?
Yes, have fun. Like I said, eat the chocolate cake. Indulge yourself. I don't really like chocolate cake, but you can have whatever makes you happy.
I didn't like the cake that was being served last night. I know that much.
I didn't even try that cake. I did like the cold cookies, though. I love the cold refrigerated cookies.
They really don't need any dessert other than those cookies. I mean,
yeah, those are good cookies.
I've been a big fan of those cookies for years. If they ever change, I don't know what brand it is. I don't know who makes them. I don't know where they come from. Well, I get those cookies in the Saturdays in the fall.
Everybody's doing warm cookies now. Like, they give them to you warm. And whoever this is zagging. They're going refrigerated cold cookies. And I think that's amazing. Like, I love a cold dessert, though.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's cold because it's just been sitting in the refrigerator for 7 weeks, just waiting to be served to us.
But it's cold. It's good. Cold. It's not just like room temperature cold. It's like cold, but it's not frozen cold. It's like when the Uncrustable hits the perfect level of thawed out from your freezer. It's just right there in that sweet spot.
My favorite part about this right now is someone's listening to this podcast and yelling about us talking about cookies instead of the football team because they just don't know the dynamic that exists right here.
They're good. Enjoy it.
That's really what it is.
That's the story. They're good. Enjoy it.
All right. You know what's not good? Nebraska special teams. And it hasn't been good for a while. And I think it's going to cost them a game. I don't know what game. I don't know if it's it could cost them a monumental upset type game, or it could be a stub your toe against a team that you're clearly better than game. But among the things that went poorly for Nebraska, they missed a field goal yesterday. Their coverage unit wasn't particularly good. Now, some of that is what's difficult about Colorado is that where they're really good, they're going to stress and challenge you in ways other teams can't. So part of Nebraska's wide receivers not getting open is that they have Travis Hunter and some other guys on their back end that are really good. And then, offensively, Shedeur Sanders and those guys are good. They have playmakers. BC leaned over to me right before that kickoff, right after Nebraska scored their touchdown. And he just like, this might be one you just want to put in the end zone. Just don't even let him return it. Because even on the first one where he only got to like the 21, it looked like there was some creases there. They found the crease. And fortunate to not give up the back-breaking, immediate tie-the-game touchdown. That's one of those you go back, and if you put gold stars next to big plays, that's one of those that maybe gets forgotten about. Getting him down at the 37 instead of allowing Colorado to score right there really kind of helped set the tone for everything that followed. But you should never have put yourself in that position. Their coverage unit, like I said, a little bit shaky still. I hated the moment where you had 3 guys on your return unit just watch a ball fall between them. Like none of the up backs thought to go catch it. No one's waving a fair catch. You lose 8 yards.
They got a good hop on that.
Yeah, but it's just like those are dumb mistakes that I don't understand why we see week in and week out, regardless of who the special teams coach is, regardless of who the personnel is. They're just not smart enough on that side of the ball. Now, they got a great individual performance from Brian Buschini, who reminded people that he does have a big leg at times. But I haven't even mentioned the thing that's the most concerning. Tristan Alvano missed a field goal that it was like 37 yards, I think.
32, Schaefer.
32. I like to watch how the crowd reacts to field goals. It was missed so apparently that no one did anything on that. Like it was like off the foot. You knew it was bad. I don't know if it was a hold. I don't know if it was a snap. I don't know what it was. But unfortunately for Tristan Alvano, he is dead center bullseye of the special teams problems right now.
Yeah. Okay. So positives. Buschini. I thought
blocked field goal.
A blocked field goal. And I thought while it wasn't, it wasn't much to write home about in the punt return game, I thought that there were some tough plays that Garcia Castaneda made.
Punter's good.
For either catching the ball and securing it, or grabbing it and making a play out of that. Like I think Nebraska finally feels confident in the punt return game. So that's good. But yeah, you start with Alvano. You miss a 32-yard field goal, and Nebraska's up 14-0 at the time, right? It's not like it's a pressure field goal. It's just something's going on in the head. It's not there for Tristan right now.
It's concerning.
Yeah, and nobody. I don't think. To your point about the crowd and how they react to stuff. I actually, because the first however many minutes went so well for Nebraska, I went down to the field because I just wanted to feel it. And so I was down in that corner, right where Colorado came out, and
such a Connor Happer move.
I did. I wanted to have that experience.
You at the baseball stadium, getting out of the tiny press box to go walk around in the third inning of the game. That's 1,000% you.
Yeah, that absolutely happens all the time. But when he came out to the field, it was kind of like a little bit of a groan and a murmur. It was like, oh, here we go. What's going to happen on this one? And then, like you said, when he missed, just, flatline. It's like, all right, whatever. Let's just get our defense back out there. We'll worry about that some other time. So that's not good. Nebraska is going to have some close games this year. They didn't have one last night, but they're going to have some that depend on the leg of a kicker. You have to figure that out. Also, you mentioned the kickoff team stuff and how last week they were purposefully kicking it short of the end zone to require them to return it, and how they were doing that again this week with their dangerous. Why? Like, why? Why are you doing that? Just kick it through the end zone and have them start in a normal situation. Like, it's a risk, right? It's almost as risky as taking out the kick itself, because you're asking your team to get down there, corral them, make a tackle. You better feel really good about it. Obviously, I guess Nebraska did in their first week, but you got dangerous returners like that back. I mean, forget about it. Just kick it through the end zone, man. Like, for, don't bother with it. So yeah, another up and down thing on special teams. And obviously the glaring issues come through pretty clearly.
Yeah, I totally get why Matt Rule likes that, because you can get a potential game flip play by just getting a bad return to the 12, and then they're starting behind. Your defense hasn't backed into the end zone. I get it,
but you can catch it anywhere if you're the return team, and just like that's going to start happening too.
Well, I think they're trying to force people to make that decision. They're basically trying to force college players to make a in the moment decision, and I think their guess is they're going to bet on themselves even at the risk of a poor return, and so that's an advantage for Nebraska. But you have to be able to cover it. My thing would be when you're playing Ohio State, when you're playing USC, when you're playing Colorado, and the quality of what's back there to return it is as good as it can be. I don't know that the juice is worth the squeeze. Like with that kind of defense, just park them on the 25 and let your defensive line go to work. And so that's definitely some Sunday morning quarterbacking, because I don't know that I would have thought that necessarily right before the start of the game or anything. But I don't care if you do that against Northern Iowa or Illinois or Purdue. But with a defense as good as you have, making a team start on the 25 is still advantageous for you generally.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
You're one of the great things about how Nebraska is built is if you start a team on the 25 and they don't look like the group that's going to give up a lot of giant chunk plays, you're going to have to sustain a 75-yard drive to score a touchdown. And so, that's hard to do if your defense is this good. So that'll be something worth watching to see if they kind of change that strategy throughout the year. But I anticipate we're going to see some high pop-up kicks next week as well, landing there at about the 5-yard line. So, and maybe frankly, they can't kick it through the end zone. I mean, maybe
Hull did after they about got burned on the kick return, right? They did it on the next kick.
Right. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm just not sure what they're ultimately going to land on there, but
yeah,
overall,
I think you're right though. It's situationally dependent, like the wind and who's back there. But Nebraska's got to know, hey, let's not mess with it this time, because they about creased the first one, to your point, and then they did the second one. So maybe just a better adjustment, I suppose, in game on that one.
I want to finish with this. Did last night change how you feel about the season as ahead?
Nope.
I saw that on our message board. I thought it was an interesting thing. I personally had Nebraska as a 9-3 team beating Colorado, so there's no change for me there. I just walked out of last night thinking, similar to what this discussion has been right now, this defense is for real, and the schedule sets up really nicely. I mean, I just don't see a lot of offenses that are going to be able to kind of undo Nebraska. It's going to be whether Nebraska can avoid beating Nebraska.
Yeah, it's almost exactly how I thought it would go. While there's going to be consternation about the second half, the formula is really good. Nebraska had a suffocating defense. They didn't turn the ball over. They weren't explosive on offense, but they extended drives. They ran the ball okay. They didn't, and Raiola should have thrown that pick, the one on the little running back crosser to Ramir that ended up scoring a touchdown. It's the only touchdown pass of the night. Sometimes the bounces are going your way. But he's put the ball in harm's way 2 or 3 times in 2 games. That's something that you can live with. And he hasn't ended up actually throwing interceptions. This is the formula. I thought it would go this way. I thought Colorado would score a few more points tonight. And I thought Nebraska was probably good for another touchdown as well. But 28-10 is a good result, and 40-7 is a good result from last week. No, I think this is, part of the great thing when you feel like you kind of know what they are. And I think the offense is still evolving and developing, and you'll see that get better over time. It becomes really easy to understand what to expect and know what to expect and to know what you're going to get on a weekly basis. So this is where the math becomes really clear for Nebraska. Right? Can they not turn the ball over? Can they get 1 or 2 on defense, and not allow, more than 3 or 4 big plays that score touchdowns, like they're going to probably win the football game. It becomes pretty easy math. We haven't seen that math equation get thrown off yet.
Yeah, I mean, generally, we've been watching Nebraska attempt to play trigonometry, and this seems more like basic math. Is that what you're saying?
Addition, yeah.
This is the sort of stuff that I can do.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. All right, I think we covered.
Did you? What was the highest level of math you got to in like high school?
Algebra 3, maybe.
Yeah, algebra 3.
I never took trigonometry. Never took pre-calc. Never took calculus. This isn't going to surprise anyone. My skill set is not math science. I know that's going to be hard to believe, but those were not the areas that I was interested, nor was I going to apply any more effort than necessary.
More of an English social studies guy?
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
Yeah.
I wrote a book report in college to get extra credit for a math class so that I could graduate. It's a real story.
Yeah. Okay. So we had you pegged, or you had yourself pegged pretty well.
I think people knew.
But now I'm doing math on the radio or on a podcast, but it's very simple addition. No pre-calc needed in this situation.
You got your spreadsheets. You get between the sheets. You don't even need the math anymore.
Oh, I got to start updating my drive charts for this year. Yes, I can't wait to start doing these things. I'll do this today while I'm watching the NFL football. What a sport!
Yeah. Football today. The NFL returns. Fantastic. Happer, I don't think I have anything else for us to cover. This was a very efficient, breezy, 40+ minute conversation. There's not a lot left. I guess I could ask you, do you think USC is even better than you considered them to be?
Yes.
Based off of the start of the season. That now feels that it was basically Nebraska's second toughest game, but that they're better than I realized they would be. That's my overall conference takeaway, besides Wisconsin is who I thought they were. Iowa is definitely who I thought they were. And USC is better than I thought they were. Same with Indiana. Indiana is probably a little better than I was expecting.
USC's defense appears to be actually good,
Yeah.
Like it appears
second
to be
shutout ever for Lincoln Riley coach team, which is kind of remarkable given the talent difference that it usually has in those early season games.
And they were good against LSU last week too. So yeah, that one's hopefully that's not now that USC is good and Nebraska appears to be okay. That we might not get our 10 p.m. kickoff after all. We might get the middle of the primetime window on that one. So that's probably positive for everybody. But no, yeah, they probably are a hair better than everybody thought they were going to be, at least adjusted. Now, here's a team that's not on Nebraska's schedule that's had a very interesting first 2 weeks. Oregon, watch out. What's going on there? Their offensive line is a stinky. So I'm not sure what's going to happen on that one.
Yeah, that Oregon State game is suddenly very kind of fascinating. I mean, I know it wasn't on the short list of where ESPN was going to take game day, because anytime you can go to South Carolina for a game against LSU, 1-1 LSU, you got to do it. I'm sure they were sad that Kentucky lost that game to South Carolina, so they couldn't do the extremely exciting Kentucky-Georgia game where Kentucky loses by 48 points. But,
stupid.
The slate is terrible. Have you looked at week 3?
No, actually I haven't, but now I'm excited to.
You're gonna have a pretty open Saturday before Nebraska plays next weekend.
They play at night, right? Nebraska plays at night.
Another night game.
Okay.
You gotta wait all day to get to Saturday night.
Oh my! There's nobody. No ranked team plays anyone of note. Is there anything going on in the Big Ten? Alabama, Wisconsin. Who's good?
That's gonna be ugly. I think Alabama will have their way in that game.
Indiana UCLA is a game next week.
Yeah, that's gonna be an intriguing game. A Big Ten classic. Indiana UCLA. Give me Indiana today. Just give me Indiana. I don't care what the spread is. I don't care if they're favored or if they're not favored. Just give me Indiana.
There you go.
It's going to be a big week for pumpkin patches and apple picking, I think.
I think so too. You're right. I probably have to go to that as well.
Yeah. Yep. You're going to be in an apple orchard next week. You're just going to have to enjoy it. And then you get to go to the game or watch the game on Saturday night.
Yeah, maybe I'll come to the game. I don't think I have Big Red Overreaction next week. I've started the first two, and maybe I'm free next weekend. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Who knows? That's never really finalized until the day of, right? People could just get called into action and have to be drafted to Minnesota to help things out. You just never know what's going to happen.
Interesting. Interesting thing that you mentioned there. Could happen. You never know.
All right. Happer, appreciate you joining the Sunday side session. We ran through Nebraska's 28-10 win. Everyone, be sure to stop by Husker247.com. Plenty of coverage. BC is, I think he's still awake, still writing stories from the post game last night. He probably won't sleep until 3 o'clock this afternoon after watching Sam Darnold lead the Vikings to an exciting, thrilling win against maybe one of the other worst teams in the NFL and the New York Giants. So be sure to check out Husker247.com. Plenty of recruiting coverage coming. Alan True has been blowing my phone up while Happer and I have talked, so I need to look at that. But True, I'm sure will have a story coming. A lot of 2026s, 2027s on campus last night. Of course, the big 2025 guys were there as well. We'll have all that coverage at Husker247. Be sure to listen to the Connor Happer Show, especially at 11:30 on Mondays, because I'll be on. And if you enjoyed this conversation, you'll get more of that tomorrow at 11:30.
Schaefer and I get to repeat our radio magic that we left behind every week, at least once a week. And now we get to do it a little more. There's still little magic left, Schaefer. Is the magic gone? No, it's still there.
The magic is still there. All right, everybody. We'll catch you next time here at Husker 24/7.